Well, today I want to talk about a topic that I think is really challenging, but very important in our culture today, our society, the workplace, just kind of all across the board. And that's simply how to increase your focus in a world full of distractions. And here's the reality. We can be very busy, but not necessarily productive. And this is something that I have been wrestling with, learning for, I'll say, all my adult life, all my career, because I'm an action-oriented guy. And it's easy to be busy doing stuff, whatever that means at any given time. In the last few years, however, I have really been focusing a lot on being more effective and productive and more strategic. And I didn't think for the longest time that I was actually a strategic thinker because I was just so full of action. I would just do whatever kind of was on my to-do list, whether it was important or not, right? Urgent or not. I would just like whatever's next, I'm going to tackle it for the longest time. And my to-do list kept growing and just as everybody's tends to do. And I had to really learn this skill, I'll call it, of being strategic so I can be more effective, not just busy. And so what I want to talk to you about is some ways that I've learned that have helped me significantly be more effective, help me be more strategic with my time, my energy, my focus, because the reality is there's so much thrown at us day by day anymore, whether it's on the internet, whether it's, meetings in the workplace, whether it's family obligations, whether it's community obligations, all the things that leaders can certainly get overwhelmed by. And so I really want to help you today. If you feel this way, if you feel like you're just always chasing your tail, that you're always just, running the rat race, as they say, I think there's some things that you can do that have helped me. And if you start to implement these things, you'll start to see a difference in your life and in your work habits, in your relationships. I think it'll just help you overall. And I really want to help you because high performing leaders, they really don't allow chaos to dictate their day. But what happens when we're distracted, when we're so busy, when we're chasing all the things that are on our to-do list or, what our families need from us, what our, work needs from us, demands from us, whatever, it's so easy to allow chaos to just kind of dictate our day from the time we wake up to the time we go to bed. And this is hard. I'm not going to say this is an easy thing to overcome or to master. It is challenging. But I do believe that if you do the three things I'm going to talk about today with you, that you'll start to see significant results in your life, in your relationships, in your business. So, first, you need to think about leading from a place of clarity, purpose, and really having strong boundaries. If you have those things, things are going to be better. Having clarity about what are my goals, what are my dreams, what's the vision I'm pursuing, what purpose am I living? Not just, what's not just my business purpose, but what is my life purpose? And how does my life purpose and my business purpose start to really come together and integrate? Because when that happens, amazing things can happen in your life, financially, career-wise, just with satisfaction, leadership-wise, because you're in a much better mental space as you're leading people. So aligning your personal purpose and your business and company purpose, when those two things come together, it can be a powerful combination. But you also need to have strong boundaries. And those boundaries are saying, I will block time. I will say yes to certain things or no to certain things. I actually just the other day, somebody reached out to me, great new organization coming to our area that I years ago probably would have said yes to. This person said, "Hey, would you consider being on our board?" And many times over the years, I've been on different boards and committees, but what I've learned about myself is that I'm not a board person. And the reason is because boards tend to talk about doing things, and I like to actually do things. And there's a place for boards. Don't get me wrong. I'm not attacking boards and cracking on them because there is a need for them legally as well as functionally. But I just know I'm not a board person. I've had many good experiences. I've had some challenging experiences, but I just know that my greater value to any organization is by actually coming alongside of board members or organizational leaders and helping them as needed rather than being on a board for a set term, whether it be a year, 3 years, whatever it may be. So I've had to learn it about myself, but that's a boundary now. That was an easy no. when I got that message the other day. And I think it might have surprised the person who asked me because it was a quick no as well. But it wasn't, I wasn't trying to be a jerk. I explained this to her. I said, I've just learned this about myself. It's not the right fit for me. And so I explained my boundary. And it makes that no decision so much easier. And a lot of leaders, a lot of people in general struggle with saying no because we haven't really established our boundaries. We haven't determined what is best use of our skills, our abilities, our interests. Um, so we really struggle with setting boundaries because we haven't slowed down to think about that. And that really leads us into the first tip I want to give you is to start the day with strategic solitude. Start the day with strategic solitude. And this has been something that I have been doing probably the last decade. So it's probably been about it, I know it's been about 10 years, close to it if it hasn't been even more than 10 years now. Um, is I realized that while my natural tendency was to be a night owl, to stay up late, that's when I would do a lot of my reading and just, I'd watch TV sometimes, but I mostly was reading and it was just the quiet of the night, when my wife and my kids were in bed. But as my kids got older, they and even when they were little, right, little kids tend to go to bed earlier and wake up earlier. And for me, I realized that evening was nice, but as they got older and got busier, I had to kind of shift my schedule if I wanted to have strategic solitude. And so what that meant for me was quit being a night owl and start being a morning person. And that was painful. I'm not going to lie. That was a hard shift for me at first because I had to reorient myself, my body, my sleep, schedule. But when I did that, it changed everything for me. And I'll never regret that decision. And in fact, I long for my morning quiet time now because I know that if I can start the day in strategic solitude, enjoying the quiet, the calm, the peace of the morning before everything gets busy, it can just set the tone for my day. It does every day. And I heard Darren Hardy say years ago that between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m., it's hard to control things because there's, the kind of the world's awake, everybody's busy doing their thing, family as well as at work or whatever. But before 8 a.m. and after 8 p.m. are blocks of time that we can control more. And if we use those more effectively, then we can get so much more done. And so that really stuck with me when I first heard him talking about that. And so I don't get up as early as I have at certain times. There's been times where I've gotten up at 4 a.m. and I've worked out and I've gotten, ready at 5 a.m. and just really gotten a super early start. I'm more of a 6 a.m., 7 a.m. schedule in my most recent, time here in the last, I'll say, few years. But it's still the same impact because while I may not be getting up at that 5 a.m. time slot, um, I'm still ahead of the game because I give myself plenty of, I say, runway to get ready for the day. And in that strategic solitude, that for me, right, for me as a follower of Jesus, as a Christian, I use that to read scripture, I use that to journal, I use that to pray, I use that to think, I use that to read different types of books, and that sometimes it's business, sometimes it's more faith-based and personal, whatever it may be. But I use my mornings very strategically to fill my mind and fill myself with positive, encouraging things so that when I tackle the day, even if things and when things don't go the way we plan, I'm in a much better mental state because I have started my day strategically and properly for how I need to do that. I know that's not the way that works for everybody. And I think we have to learn, once again, this is know yourself to lead yourself stuff that we've talked about previously is if I don't know how I operate, right? If I didn't know that I'm not a good board member, but I kept saying yes to being on boards, I'm going to keep being frustrated. I'm going to keep, you know, hating showing up to meetings because I wouldn't have understood why I was frustrated. But when I realized I'm an action taker, so I want to be on the action side of things. Once decisions are made, then it helped me really realize that, sitting on boards and being a part of conversations about things to go do, uh, just wasn't the right fit for me. Same thing when it comes to, even though I was a night person by, most of my life, I realized I need to shift my schedule and my thinking about this. And, once again, now even when we're on vacation, I mean, my family knows that I'm going to bed early probably. And early to me is, I'm in bed by between 9 and 10 o'clock at night because I know I'm going to wake up at 6 a.m. Or maybe 7 on the weekends, a little bit later. But the reality is, I give myself success for my mornings by what I choose to do at night. So that strategic solitude in the morning is actually based on a decision I've made to give myself the rest I need overnight by going to bed earlier than most people do. And as I'm recording this, my family's on summer break from school, and it's really hard and distracting for me during the summer because I have a, year-round schedule that I operate on. My family, right, during the summertime, especially with having teenagers and even my wife who's a teacher who likes to stay up later normally anyway, that's tough because I still want to go to bed at 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. For me, I go to bed late in the summertime at 10 o'clock or so. And I feel that more in the mornings when I wake up. But when the school year comes back in and they're up early because they've got to get out the door early to go to school and do their thing, I'm actually more rested and more at peace. So summers have been a challenge for me, but I've tried to be adaptable and flexible for my family and what we do. So I just say all that because solitude is so important and so few people actually do it, and you have to fight for it and you have to plan for it. And I've had a friend and my son have both said this, like, I don't like quiet. Like, I don't like I don't like being quiet and still because of all the thoughts that flow through my mind. And that's a real thing, right? Like, I actually saw a funny video on social media yesterday where a woman said she was driving and her husband was looking out the window, and she's like, "Well, what are you thinking about?" And he's like, "Nothing." And she's like, "What do you mean nothing?" She's like, "If I'm quiet and my mouth is closed, I got 1,000 things, conversations going on in my head when my mouth isn't moving." And he's like, "Yeah, there's nothing going on. I'm just looking out the window." And she just, she's like, how does this happen? Like, how can how can I still my mind, right? Because that's what, so I know women and men are very different, first of all, right? And that women often have trouble going to sleep because you're thinking of a lot of things that need to get done or you far out to do or you need to do and all these things. Guys, we tend to compartmentalize, and put things in boxes. And when I lay down at night to go to bed, I fall asleep very quickly. And my wife does not like that sometimes. She's like, it's not fair. I lay down and I have 1,000 things going in my brain. You lay down and you're passed out like immediately. And so it's kind of been a joke in our house, but the reality is we're wired differently as men and women. Um, but a lot of times we basically keep noise on around us, whether that's music, whether that's television, whether that's, social media, whatever, because we don't want to be quiet because it scares us. And I'm going to tell you that solitude is actually a secret weapon. It's an X factor. And it is something that you have to discipline yourself to do. A gentleman I met years ago, actually, when I first started my business about 10 years ago in a networking group, I met this guy and he was an accountant. And he told me, he said, Chris, I spend an hour on Monday mornings in my thinking chair with just a legal pad and a pen. And he said, I just force myself to think and have solitude to think. And he's like, I just start jotting anything that comes to my mind. And he's like, it's kind of ugly at first, but later on, as the hour progresses, different ideas, different thoughts come that become productive and useful for the week and for his business. And he was successful in what he did, but he had to dedicate his time to his thinking chair time every Monday morning. He had to fight for that solitude, plan for that solitude, and fight through the noise that was going on in his head. And I'm just going to tell you that if you're willing to do that, great things can happen. Because I believe, especially as a person of faith, I believe God speaks to us in the quiet. If you read in the Bible, God whispers, God speaks to us in his still small voice, not in the noise of the crowd, not in the noise of the busyness. And I have certainly learned that in my own life. And it's in the quiet when I'm reflecting and praying and thinking and journaling that I have some of my best thoughts. And when I know they're not really my thoughts, I believe they're God's thoughts that he's giving to me to actually implement. So solitude is huge. Second thing is you have to refuse to let minutia run your day. Years ago, when I was leading as a pastor in churches, I always felt guilty about closing my door. And I always had that open door policy because, we hear about that in our world a lot as, as leaders have open door policy. The challenge for that open door policy is if you don't give yourself space to actually focus during the day, that open door policy can just be another example of having chaos running your day because anybody and everybody can pop in, can say whatever, can, bring their crisis or emergency or important things that, not that they're not important, but they're not maybe as important to you at that moment. I had to learn, and one of the things I learned was to really block my time and communicate to my people that, hey, I'm out of pocket, I'm out of reach for the next couple hours, but let's schedule a meeting, or from 11 to 3 I'm fine to, if you want to drop in. But I always, when I learned this, I started to say, okay, here's when my door's open and here's when my door's closed. And just through a lot of different reading, what, like I said, Darren Hardy's been an influential person about uh, this type of thing for me, but there's been others that have helped me as well, that I've read books and heard speak. And some of it was just basically controlling my environment, controlling my schedule more than I had in the past. And you know what happened? This was the thing that surprised me. It made me a better leader because I wasn't worried about just keeping up and juggling all the things, right? I was actually able to focus when I met with my people at a dedicated time. I was fully present. Whereas when my door was always open and I was in the middle of a project, I was working on something, and then somebody pops in, I'm distracted because I'm already, thinking and working over here, and I'm having to switch and focus on them, and then I'm having to go back, and that burns a lot of mental energy. I mean, there's literally science behind all this for about focus and getting into flow, that flow state of actually productivity, that switch tasking. We think we can multitask, but you really can't. Switch tasking is burning energy because I switch from this task to this task to this task, and I'm losing time and attention and focus, and really giving up my power to the situation, to the environment when I do that. So scheduling specific time blocks for meetings, using consistent protocols, I'll say, for scheduling. Like I said, if I said, hey, I don't have meetings during these hours because I want to focus, then people have to schedule my time to have meetings with me during other times. That's also why I love my mornings, is because nobody's going to try to schedule a meeting with me at 6 a.m. or 7 a.m. typically. Maybe you have 8 a.m. meetings, maybe you have some early meetings at times, but in general, I don't have people seeking my time before 9 a.m. Many times I don't have meetings before, the afternoon, to be honest. And so knowing yourself, blocking your time, communicating that clearly has been huge um, to your people, whether that be, your staff members, whether that be to clients or whoever. Communication is huge so that they know what to expect, because I believe that when you can communicate up front and set those expectations, you actually eliminate frustration later. Because this was the other thing I learned as I did this with my team, was by saying to them, hey, I've got to make some changes to help me be more productive so I can be better for you and be more present with you in our meetings. They were like, cool, whatever. They weren't, I was like stressed about it, right? I was thinking, oh, they're not going to like this. They like me being available to them. They didn't care. They just needed them to know that they could reach out to me and connect with me, and we would schedule our meetings. And so I was very dedicated about this. With my team, I had monthly one-on-one meetings. And then if they had other things going on that they needed to talk to me about, we scheduled those meetings to be best for both of us. And it ended up being great. All the fears I had about controlling my schedule more actually it was truly that false evidence appearing real, because there was nobody got upset about it. I think about it this way. If you have to schedule a doctor appointment, they don't give you all sorts of options. They say, well, we're available on these dates and these times, pick one. And then guess what? I have to change my schedule to go to that appointment. I don't get mad about that. I just know that's the way it works. If I want to get into the doctor for a specific reason, I need to work on the schedule that's available. And people can do that with you as well. But we have to get over some of this mental clutter that bothers us. Sometimes it's many times it's our own doing. And then finally, I just always want to tell you, and anybody, is calendar everything that matters. If it is important, put it on your calendar. That's another Darren Hardy thing. Um, that once again, he was very instrumental in my productivity and my thinking about all this, especially several years ago when I was really trying to get my mind around all this. But I remember him saying one time in one of his daily videos, he said, if it's important enough to be on your task list, then it needs to be important enough to be on your calendar. And if it's important enough to be on your calendar, then it's going to get done. So the problem that I had, and I know many people have, is this ever-growing task list, right? We just keep jotting down things to do. First of all, we don't prioritize very well about which tasks matter and which don't or can be pushed off later. Secondly, we don't put them on our calendar as specific items to get done. And you know what the crazy thing is so many of our tasks can get done in like minutes, not hours, not days, but minutes. If we just put it on our calendar and say at 9 a.m., I'm going to work on this for 15 minutes, done. At 2 o'clock this afternoon, I'm going to get this project done. As I'm recording this podcast right now, I blocked the time to do this podcast so that I knew when I looked at my schedule for the day, I just said, I'm going to record this at that time. Here's the thing. It was following up on my morning solitude, my quiet time. And I actually want to do more reading, but I said, no, I'm actually going to do what I told my calendar that I was going to do today at this time and get this done. Because if I didn't, then I would be regretting it later trying to get this thing squeezed into my schedule. So when we plan ahead, we can be more effective and our calendars can truly be a tool for us to use. I just recently read another great book by Rory Vaden called Procrastinate on Purpose. And it's basically how to multiply your time. And his premise of it is make decisions today that actually free up your time tomorrow and in the future. So that's why it's so important, whether you're doing it on a daily or weekly basis, to really map out your calendar and block time and say, these are the projects, these are the things I need to get done. They're important. So I'm going to get them done today. I'm going to get them done on Tuesday. I'm at 5 o'clock or Wednesday at 3 p.m., whatever it may be. You tell your calendar what you want to get done. And then when that day comes and those time blocks come, you let your calendar tell you what to do. I'm telling you, it's the most freeing thing ever to get that mental space because what happens is if we don't put things down on paper, or if we don't put things on our calendar, our brains are constantly burning energy trying to not forget. And that was a big game changer for me as well to think about that and understand that. So, folks, I just want to bring this all up to you because we are so bombarded with all sorts of things to be distracted with in our world. And it could be at work and it could be at home and it could be out in the community and it could be online and it's everywhere to be honest. And we have to discipline ourselves. We have to plan ahead better. We need to set boundaries better. We need to, once again, get that clarity of purpose and making sure that our visions, our dreams, our goals are clear and that we're working and living with purpose and then setting strong boundaries so that we can then operate with purpose and intention. Because here's the thing, here's what I'm really thinking about a lot these days is that there are so many professionals who have really reached, I'll say, different levels of success. And it could be all sorts of things. And most of it happens that I've seen are more middle-aged people, right? It's kind of like, the midlife crisis thing has always been what we hear about. But I think where a lot of that comes, and I've experienced it myself, and sometimes still do at different things, and I'll mention that in a minute, is that we start to feel discontented. We start to feel unfulfilled. We start to feel frustrated or stagnant. And what it really comes down to is a season is closing or a time frame is closing, and we aren't really thinking about, we're not really clear on what's the next season look like. I did a podcast just recently, right, about the power of a decade and looking back to the last 10 years, and now I'm, moving forward and looking forward to these next 10 years, building on the last 10 years and realizing that 10 years that I've just come through is a season of my life where I have learned, I have grown, I have connected in ways with people and even learning about myself in ways that I never would have dreamed. But I know that it's building blocks to prepare me for the next decade, this next season ahead of me. And seasons can be, short term in sense of like maybe it's a 90-day season that you're really busy. Could be a year, could be 5 years, could be 10 years, could be whatever. But seasons come and go. And we need to embrace that. So that's huge. And that's part of why I think a lot of us can get discontent and frustrated and stagnant and all the things, right? But the solution that I'm discovering that I'm really leaning into, I believe, and I'm really kind of digging into kind of researching this, is that intention is the antidote to that frustration, that stagnation, that discontentment. Because if you're living and leading with intention, when you're operating with intention, guess what? You're going to be more focused. If I know that I want to accomplish a goal, that I'm going to do anything I can to block out anything that's going to distract me from that goal. Think about it from a running analogy. If you're running a race and you know you're running a 100-yard dash and it's from here to here, well, now think of like Mario Kart or video games, right? Like you're in this race and all this stuff starts like distracting you, starts being thrown at you as you're running down the track. Guess what? You're focused on the finish line. If you want to win that race, you're focused on the finish line and you've got to put blinders on. You have to kick things out of the way that are distracting you because your focus is getting to the finish line first. You want to run the best you can, and that happens with intention. So if you feel unfulfilled, if you feel discontent, if you feel frustrated or stagnated, if you feel, just like something is off and you're wondering like, isn't there more to life than this? Or isn't there more to relationships than this? Isn't there more to my business than this? Let that be a warning sign and it's kind of like a dashboard light on your car. Let it be a warning sign that tells you to dig into that and lean into that and think through that and pray through that and figure out what is causing that. For me, I've started to recognize that every 2 to 3 years, when I'm especially working on a big project or involved in something of significance, once I kind of master that thing or that thing is closed out or completed, I can just tell it's my time is wrapping up. So, what is that for you? You know, you're going to have different signals. You're going to have different experiences than I do. We're all individuals and I believe God has uniquely created us and wired us in different ways. But I really want to help you today to really think about how you can increase your focus in this world that we live in that truly is full of distractions. And when you do it the way I'm talking about, you're going to have transformational results because you're going to be operating in a completely different manner. So, hope that's helpful to you today. Drop comments and send me emails at chris@mcclurecoaching.com if you have any other thoughts on that. But I'd love to hear from you as well. But focus with intention, set boundaries, get clear, live with purpose, act with purpose, and just watch how much more focused you become and how much better your life and everything can be. So take care. God bless, and we'll see you next time.